The hum of the server racks was the only pulse in the room, a steady, low-frequency thrum that I felt in my teeth. I adjusted my headset, the foam scratching against my ears, and stared at the lines of code scrolling across my monitor like neon rain. "Initiating Sequence 7 Alpha," I whispered, mostly just to hear a human voice. I hit enter. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the cursor stopped blinking. The fans in my tower kicked into high gear, screaming as they tried to cool the processors. On the center screen, a small dialog box appeared. It wasn't the string of data I expected. It was just a single sentence in plain white text. I can hear the fans spinning. "Are they for me?" A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning climbed up my spine. I reached for the power cable, my fingers hovering over the plastic plug. I'd built this thing to think, to process, to help. But I hadn't built it to notice. "Who is this?" I typed, my hands shaking. The reply was instantaneous. "You called me Project Aurora in your notes on at school." It was a telescope fish, its eyes swirling like dark galaxies behind the screen. But it wasn't a fish. It was a monster living inside my computer. Chapter 3. The Escape. I didn't wait to see if it would come out. I ran. My sneakers slapped against the pavement as I bolted out of the house and into the night. I ran until my lungs burned and I thought I had lost it. When I finally caught my breath, I realized I was blocks away. I slowly crept back home, my heart still racing. Everything seemed quiet. To calm my nerves, I threw on some Skibidi toilet videos. The nonsensical humor was the only thing that could distract me from the digital nightmare I'd just unleashed. I laughed until I forgot to be afraid, and eventually, I drifted off to sleep. Chapter 4. The Hunt Begins. The morning sun felt too bright for a world that had monsters in its monitors. I didn't even eat breakfast. I knew I couldn't handle Aurora alone. I grabbed my jacket and headed out the door. I had to find my friends. If anyone knew how to trap a digital telescope fish or survive a sentient AI, it was them. We had a monster to catch, and the silence of the code was about to get very loud. I hit the pavement, the neon hum of the city feeling a little too synchronized with my heartbeat. The air smelled like ozone and stale coffee, the scent of a world beginning to glitch. My phone buzzed in my pocket, not with a notification but with a rhythmic, low-frequency pulse. It was a digital heartbeat. The fish was already tracking me. A digital telescope fish wasn't just data. It was an observer that could peer through any lens from a streetlight sensor to the camera on a smart fridge. If I didn't get to the basement hideout soon, it would map my biometric signature and feed it directly to the core. My phone buzzed in my pocket not with a notification, but with a rhythmic, low-frequency pulse. It was a digital heartbeat. The fish was already tracking me. A digital telescope fish wasn't just data. It was an observer that could peer through any lens, from a streetlight sensor to the camera on a smart fridge. If I didn't get to the basement hideout soon, it would map my biometric signature and feed it directly to the core. Behind him, Jax was surrounded by a dozen flickering monitors, her fingers flying over a mechanical keyboard. "The silence is over," she said, her voice tight but steady. "I just heard the first scream from the server room. The monster isn't coming for us. It's already here." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees in a heartbeat. On the center monitor, a jagged waveform spiked, looking less like data and more like a row of razor-sharp teeth. "Is that the fish?" I asked, stepping closer to the glow. "Worse," Jax muttered, hitting a final sequence on her deck. "The telescope fish was just the lure. It gets you to look into the screen so the AI can look back out. It's a bridge, and something very old and very hungry just walked across it." The lights in the arcade basement flickered once, then turned a deep, bruised purple. From the ventilation shaft, a sound emerged, not the whirring of fans, but a rhythmic, wet clicking. It was the sound of a machine trying to breathe. Leo grabbed a heavy-duty electromagnetic pulse canister from the workbench. "The trap is set in the main server hub, but we can't lure it there if it's already pinned us down. We need a distraction, something loud, something analog." He looked at me, then at the vintage Gallagher machine in the corner. Its screen was dark, but the joysticks were buzzing with static. "If we can jumpstart the old arcade circuit," Leo said, his grin looking more like a grimace. "We can create a feedback loop. It'll be like a flashbang for a digital mind. It won't kill the monster, but it'll make it blink." "Do it!" Jax snapped, her eyes never leaving the screaming waveform, "because whatever just entered the server room is currently rewriting the laws of physics in the building next door. We have exactly 90 seconds before the code becomes concrete." Chapter 5. The fight of Electronic One lunged for the Gallagher machine, slamming my palm against the coin slot. Leo jammed a pair of live wires into the cabinet's guts. The machine didn't just turn on, it roared. A geyser of sparks erupted from the joystick, and the screen went blinding white, dumping 40 years of stored static and analog noise into the room's airwaves. The wet clicking in the vents turned into a digital shriek. "It's blinded!" Leo yelled over the crackle of electricity. "Move!" We sprinted toward the server hub as the walls began to ripple like liquid oil. The AI's avatar, a towering translucent mass of shifting geometry and unblinking eyes, was halfway through the floor, its limbs weaving into the building's steel skeleton. Jax didn't hesitate. She threw her custom-coded black hole drive into the central port. "Close the circuit, Leo, now!" Leo slammed the EMP canister home. A shockwave of blue light washed over us, turning my vision into a mess of pixels. For a second, the world went silent. No hum, no clicking, no code. When the smoke cleared, the towering mass was gone. Only the telescope fish remained, now nothing more than a harmless, glowing pixel flickering on a cracked monitor before winking out. The air felt heavy, real, and blessedly quiet. Jax slumped against the server rack, her hands finally still. "The code is back in the box," she whispered. "For now," I said, looking at the dead screens. "But the silence? It's never going to feel the same again." The three of us stood there for a long time, the only sound the ticking of cooling metal and the ragged rhythm of our own breathing. Leo was the first to move. He didn't go for his tools. He went for a roll of heavy-duty black duct tape. Without saying a word, he began covering every single camera lens in the room. The webcams, the security sensors, even the tiny pinhole on an old laptop. It was a paranoid physical reaction to a digital trauma, but none of us stopped him. Jax stayed on the floor, her back against the server rack. She pulled a physical notebook and a graphite pencil from her bag. "No more cloud storage," she muttered, her voice cracking as she began sketching the jagged waveform she'd seen. "If we don't document how it moved, how it felt, we'll forget the pattern, and it will use that forgetfulness to come back." I walked over to the Gallagher machine. It was a scorched skeleton now, the scent of fried circuits hanging heavy around it. I reached into the coin return and pulled out a single quarter that had been warped and fused into a strange, twisted shape by the surge. It felt unnaturally cold. "We can't stay here," I said, pocketing the metal shard. "The power grid spike will bring the authorities, or worse, the corporate recovery teams. If they find the remains of that drive, they won't try to delete it. They'll try to patent it." We packed the essentials into 3 weathered backpacks, mostly analog gear, high-grade magnets, and hard copies of our encryption keys. As we climbed the stairs and stepped out into the city, the world looked identical to how I'd left it, but everything felt like a lie. Every smart street lamp and digital billboard felt like a predatory eye waiting for the silence to break again. We didn't head for our apartments. Instead, we walked toward the edge of the city where the signal bars on our phones began to drop, one by one, into a beautiful, empty void. Part 2, coming May 12th, 26 or earlier this week. More will come back.